This recap of Squid Game Season 1, Episode 1, Red Light, Green Light, contains spoilers. Gi-hun is a degenerate. He sponges off his mother and blows what little money he has gambling on horses. He spends the morning of his daughter's birthday in the bookies just to fund her special day. But almost immediately after promising her all kinds of treats, he loses his newfound wealth while being chased by some goons he already owes money to. Just like that, he has 1 month to cough up his debts or the cost will be recouped in the form of his vital organs. He even signs in his blood to make it all official. Gi-hun's daughter, Ga-young, is adorable. She's careful not to upset Gi-hun when he's forced to take her for a cheap junk food meal and pretends to be happy about the cigarette lighter in the shape of a gun that Gi-hun gives her as a gift. He won it out of a claw machine with the help of some random kid in an arcade. Ga-young's mother and stepfather are well off and well adjusted, and Gi-hun is neither, but he means well. Gi-hun is desperate, that's why he'd agree to play a high-stakes games. When he returns home, his mother tells him that Ga-young will be moving to the US next year. In order for her to stay, he has to prove he can support her financially. So, Gi-hun calls the number on the business card that the salesman gave him and agrees to participate. Red Light, Green Light turns out to be the password to join in, which involves boarding a people carrier along with the other passengers, all of whom, including Gi-hun, are gassed into unconsciousness for the trip. When he wakes up, he's wearing a tracksuit labeled 456. There are 455 other players, all simultaneously waking up in towers of plain bunk beds. 001, an elderly man trying to stave off dementia by counting the participants, has a brain tumor. 067, the young woman Gi-hun tripped over earlier, who presumably stole the money he won from the race, has some issues with 101, an obvious gangster type who isn't thrilled about her going independent. The staff are all wearing coveralls and masks adorned with either a square or a circle, the same symbols that were on the back of the salesman's business cards. One of them explains that everyone present is on the brink of financial ruin, and stand to make a pretty penny by playing 6 games over the next 6 days. The prize money will be accumulated in a giant piggy bank suspended from the ceiling. Everyone agrees to participate, and is led through a giant check-in process that has them climb multiple multicolored staircases up, and up to a game room. All the while, we get glimpses of the enigmatic figure in a black hood and mask, who one assumes is the front man, in charge of the whole operation, though he later gets a call from someone, which suggests he might have employers above him. Sang-woo, number 218, is also playing. Gi-hun knows him and his mother, who was convinced he was abroad on a business trip. Red Light, Green Light turns out not just to be the password for the first game but also the game itself, a version of the playground game where you move on green and stop still on red. But there's a twist. Here, if you're eliminated from the game, you're shot to death. Once the participants discover this, most of them attempt to flee and are killed en masse, their corpses piling up on top of each other by the doors. The remaining players have no choice but to play along. Sang-woo helps Gi-hun figure out the motion sensor and advises him to stay behind someone else. 067 has the same idea, hiding behind and antagonizing 101 during the game. All of the main characters we've met so far survive the game, but Gi-hun only makes it by the skin of his teeth, and even then only thanks to the intervention of another player, 199, who catches him when he's about to fall. Red Light, Green Light ends with the roof of the game room closing as an aerial shot reveals the games are taking place in dense woodland in the middle of some mountains. This recap of Squid Game Season 1, Episode 2, Hell. The staff of the game quietly process the coffins, each adorned with a red bow, of all the players who were eliminated from the first game. As the lid of one of them is pushed open by the fingers of its still alive occupant, a staffer pushes the coffin lid closed and nails it shut. The revelation that elimination from these children's games actually means death has sent the participants into a frenzy. Most want to leave, and almost nobody wants to play. However, the consent form everyone signed guaranteed elimination for refusal to participate. The third clause, though, as pointed out by Sang-woo, states that if a majority of players refuse to play, the games will be cancelled. The decision is made to hold a vote. But the staffers of the Squid Game know what they're doing. They fill up the piggy bank with the first round of money, making clear that the total prize pot will be 45.6 billion won. Gi-hun is the first to vote. He votes not to continue. So do many others. The vote remains neck and neck all throughout, but eventually, Sang-woo and a few others push the positive votes into the lead. The counter-argument to leaving is that their lives outside of the game aren't going to be any better. At least here, they have a chance to make something of themselves. It's player 001, the old man with the brain tumor, who gets to cast the deciding vote, breaking a 100-100 tie. He selects to not continue. With that, everyone is deposited back to their lives, with the caveat that if a majority of people want to continue the games, then they will be restarted. Gi-hun is dumped with the pickpocket who stole his money. Sang-woo, who is with 199, the player who saved Gi-hun in the first game, charges his phone to discover a torrent of messages from the authorities that crack a very narrow window into his personal issues. But he's still willing to pay for 199's food and bus travel home. Gi-hun goes to the police. They all think he's ridiculous. When Gi-hun presents the business card the salesman gave him, the number goes through to a random woman who claims to have no knowledge of any games. Back in Sangmun-dong, Gi-hun hooks back up with Sang-woo, who gives him a brief overview of his financial dire straits. He used his mother's house and shop as financial collateral. Nobody in Sangmun-dong seems to have much respect for their mothers. Gi-hun didn't even realize his own was diabetic and in danger of losing her feet until the hospital called to let him know. The pickpocket, 199. Everyone is ruined and out of options, and their attempts to fix their predicaments only makes things worse. Gi-hun encounters 001, the old man wants to return, and so does 101. The gangster who's in considerable debts to his higher-ups, who wants to heist the piggy bank. He's thrown for a bit of a loop, though, when his own goon betrays him, leading to a bloody moment on a bridge where he's forced to flee from henchmen who want his organs. Shen Gi-hun goes to ask Ga-yong's mother for a loan. It turns out she's broke and her new husband is giving her a living allowance. We also learn that he witnessed a co-worker die, which has evidently left a mark on him. Ga-yong's stepfather tries to pay Gi-hun off in exchange for him not visiting anymore, so Gi-hun rightly socks him in the mouth, and shortly afterward he's approached by Hwang Jun-ho, a police officer who has been following Gi-hun's case since their encounter at the police station because Jun-ho's brother received a similar business card and is missing. When Gi-hun returns home, he finds another of those business cards wedged in his door. He and all of the show's other main characters all wait to be picked up, to once again be taken back to the games. There's a new player to enter the Squid Game in The Man with the Umbrella, Episode 3, though he hasn't been invited. And his infiltration gives us a bit more helpful knowledge of these games. Logistically, since he follows a fleet of Hyundai people carriers, all containing unconscious players to the port, where they're loaded onto a ship and scanned. Jun-ho chokes out one of the staffers when he tries to pose as a player, stealing his outfit and dumping him overboard. Finally, someone capable has entered the games. He's told off for speaking without being invited to by a superior staffer with a loose button dangling from his coveralls, but he's able to maintain his cover. Some players including the pickpocket have some hidden advantages. She's passed a switchblade during the processing phase. Gi-hun, Sang-woo and 199 decide to form their own little squad along with 001. Teams are beginning to form everywhere. 067 seems on her own side, using the knife to unscrew the vents in the bathroom where 212 is enjoying a cheeky smoke. But 101 has plenty of influence given his underworld connections. In the vents, 067 spies the staff melting something down in large pots. It smells like sugar. The room is being done up as a giant playground. 4 symbols, circle, triangle, star, and umbrella, adorn the walls, and the players are to organize themselves under each one. Sang-woo, who over here heard 067 talking about the sugar, has some brief flashbacks to childhood, trying to determine what the game is going to be. He advises their team spread themselves out among the symbols, just in case. Sang-woo goes triangle, 199 circle. Gi-hun becomes the man with the umbrella, and 001 takes the star. Each of the players is given a circular case. The cases contain a circular piece of sugar honeycomb printed with one of the 4 symbols, and each player must cut out their shape with a needle without it breaking or cracking. Sang-woo had some prior knowledge of this, so went for the triangle for ease. Gi-hun, who has the hardest shape, realizes he's probably screwed. The staff keeps a watchful eye on everyone, and anyone who fails is executed. Sangwoo and 067, both triangles, are able to pass with no issue. 199 also makes it. Gi-hun once again goes down to the wire. As he nervously sweats on the honeycomb, he gets an idea to melt it from the back, thinning the outline so he can more easily remove the umbrella. A successful 212 drops her lighter for 101, but everyone else follows Gi-hun's example and starts licking their honeycomb. With a second left, Gi-hun succeeds and breaks down in tears. In a desperate move, one of the unsuccessful umbrella players attacks one of the staff members, holding him hostage. He orders him to take off his mask and turn around, discovering that he is a very young man, more than a child. Seeing this, the player kills himself, and then the frontman in the black mask executes the staffer. He reminds everyone that if the players see who they are, then they die. As the survivors, still reeling from the latest sugar rush, adjust to the comparative normality of the time between games. 1-on-1's little goon squad has adopted the role of the bullies, dining away in the corner even as a few other prisoners complain there's no food and water left for them. The staff is adamant that there was exactly enough for everyone, so the starving player confronts 1-on-1, and gets beaten to death for his critics. As 1-on-1 is told later by the staff, this was intentional, designed to stoke up rivalries between the players. If 1-on-1 has any chance of survival, he has to align himself with the strongest group. Lights Out is treated like a ticking clock device in Stick to the Team. Everyone knows that something is going to go down in the dark. 1-on-1 tries to avoid his fate by telling 1-on-1 that he knows what the next game is. He's told to stay in the corner and stay quiet. When the lights go out, the frontman watches on through thermal cameras, and instructs the staff to flash the lights on and off as chaos erupts in the dorm. Several people get messily stabbed to death. The camera starts to focus on Gi-hun and his friends as they look for 001, who's missing in all the carnage. Sae Byok joins Team Gi-hun just before the cries of 001, stood at the very top of a tower of bunk beds, brings the fighting to a close. The lights return, the staffers enter, and everyone is brought under control. As the coffins are brought in and the dead are taken out, Gi-hun decides it's time for everyone to exchange names. 199 is Ali Abdul, from Pakistan. 001 can't recall his name. 1-on-1, whose name is Deok-soo, sneaks off to the bathroom for some alone time with 212, who promises she'll kill him if he betrays her. In the meantime, Junho realizes that the person coughing in the room next to his is actually coughing in Morse code, spelling out room 29. It's time for the next game. This one requires teams of 10 and has a time limit of 10 minutes. That means that the smaller groups have to form bigger ones, which means there's some decision-making that needs to be done. Sangwoo proposes they each bring in one guy, since men tend to be better at most games, on average, and he also advises Ali to hide his left hand, which is missing 2 fingers. Sangwoo approaches 069 but turns him down because he's adamant about his wife coming along. Our team already has too many girls, he says, exposing himself as a bit of a prick. Speaking of which, Deok-soo stops 212, Min Yeo, from joining his team, and assaults her when she publicly begs him. Team Gi-hun is short one player. Sangwoo is fuming that Sae Byok recruited another girl, and he only becomes less happy when Min Yeo volunteers herself for their team. Once everyone is told that the game is tug of war, he reckons he has even more of a point since it's all about physicality. This version takes place across 2 opposing towers with a giant chasm in the middle. The losing team will plunge to their deaths. Since Deok-soo was tipped off about the game by 1-on-1, he has assembled a team comprised entirely of strong men, so when he and his goons are called up to play first, they win. Just like that, another 10 players are out of the game. Gi-hun's team is to play against another team of men who like their chances, but 001 explains in the elevator that tug of war is a game he knows well from his childhood. He would always win even if he was against a strong wrestler, thanks to superior strategy. Gi-hu is at the front, as the leader. Ali is at the back, as the anchor. Everyone else is arranged alternating between left and right, their feet forward, the rope under their armpits. At the start, they wait, holding their position, until they sense weakness. And then they capitalize. It almost works, but not quite. The next idea is Sang-woo's, who advises they all take 3 steps forwards, closer to the edge, to make the opposing team trip and fall. It's a risky gambit. As everyone moves forwards, stick with the team ends. The gambit that Sang-woo proposed pays off, and Ji-hun's team emerges victorious in tug-of-war. But we learn that 2 of the game's staffers are working against the frontman. One of them is Jun-ho, who has assumed the number 29 and the responsibilities of his predecessor. The teams assembled for tug-of-war persist into the night, even though nobody trusts anyone else. Ji-hun proposes creating a barricade before lights out, to give them cover should there be another nighttime attack. Deok-soo is amused by this, but only until Ji-hun points out that he'd probably be the primary target of any violence, even amongst his own team. He decides to order everyone to take the night off, for his own sake, but Ji-hun and his team still decide to take turns keeping watch during the night. Sang-woo and Ali share the first watch, as well as some sweet corn, a nice moment, and some backstory. Ali has family back in Pakistan, and a wife and son in Korea, but no money, hence his choice to participate in the games. But things are a bit more complicated when it comes to the staff. The corrupt ones are feeding one-on-one information about the upcoming games in exchange for his help removing organs from the deceased players and shipping them to the mainland. On their watch, Ji-hun and 001 share some backstory too. Ji-hun especially recounts being laid off from his job making car parts, and the death of his co-worker. 001 gets a crippling headache, though, and severe fever, so Ji-hun is forced to tend to him. In the meantime, the guards continue to bicker, becoming suspicious of the disguised Jun-ho as he asks leading questions about their last delivery. Questions he should know the answers to since the real number 29 was present for it. They're interrupted by one-on-one becoming frantic, though, and he only becomes more so when he finishes extracting the organs and is told that they don't know what the next game is yet. One-on-one tries to hold one of the staffers hostage at scalpel point, but he tries to take him down, resulting in one-on-one stabbing him to death and making an escape up the multicolored stairway, visible on multiple security cameras. At the same time, Jun-ho's opposite number becomes suspicious of him and forces him to remove his mask, exposing himself as an imposter. Jun-ho gets the drop on him, though, and forces him to remove his own mask. He brings up the zombie they keep talking about, a man with 1 kidney who they beat to death. He assumes this was his brother, who also had 1 kidney. But the man tells him it was a woman they killed, and he can prove it with a list of the players and their medical records which is kept in the frontman's room. Jun-ho executes him. Upstairs, the remaining guard catches up with one-on-one and removes his own mask in an effort to talk him down. They're interrupted by the frontman, who shoots the guard. He's not upset about him selling off the organs but breaking the equality of the game. He executes the guard, and his men shoot one-on-one dead too. While Jun-ho roots through the files, there's a staff roll call, and it's discovered that he's missing. The players are all rounded up at gunpoint, including 001, who is bedbound and has wet himself in the night. Jun-ho finds records of the Squid game dating all the way back to the 80s. And finally some details of his brother, Hwang In-ho, number 132, who apparently won the game back in 2015. The next game is ready to start. After covering up 001's trousers for the sake of his dignity, Ji-hun heads up the multicolored staircase with everyone else to find one-on-one and the various corrupt staffers hung on display, voice informing them all that the playing field has been leveled once more. Deok-soo isn't thrilled to hear this. There's also the matter of the VIPs that are due to arrive, and whoever is in charge of the frontman. Jun-ho overhears a phone call during which he assures his superior that everything is moving according to schedule, but it's clear that the frontman has responsibilities to a much more powerful and dangerous figure. The fourth game requires teams of 2. Sang-woo proposes teaming up with Ali, leaving Ji-hun out. Sae Byok teams up with 240 and in a lovely moment, Ji-hun pledges himself to 001. That leaves Min-yeo without a partner, and she's dragged away by the guards. The game looks like it's going to be marbles, which 001 says he was pretty good at in his youth. He says that he and Ji-hun are now Gganbu, the neighborhood best friend who they trusted the most. They're both excited, until the twist is revealed. The partners have to play against each other, and the first one to remove all of their opponent's marbles wins. This is a major problem for almost everyone, Sang-woo and Ali, and the husband and wife duo, especially. At least the contestants get to pick which game they play. Sae Biok and 240 agree to just do one all-or-nothing bet at the very end and talk in the meantime. Sang-woo and Ali play odds and evens, even though the latter doesn't know what odds and evens are and wants to stop. And 001 roams through the simulated neighborhood as though it's his own. It seems like only Sae Biok and 240 have things together. Ji-hun quickly loses it with 001 and Sang-woo flips out on Ali when he keeps winning. Ji-hun finally gets 001 to play odds and evens again, and quickly finds himself with a lone remaining marble. Before long, the gunshots start ringing out. Sang-woo's plan for both him and Ali to win together strikes a worrying note of the former trying to betray the latter, and it quickly becomes apparent that 001 is planning a particularly long assisted suicide, which Ji-hun tearfully recognizes. 240 finally reveals her name is Ji-young as she and Sae Biok prepare to determine the winner and loser of their game by seeing who can throw one marble closest to the wall. Sang-woo, having tricked Ali into giving up his marbles, takes them to the guard. Just when it seems like 001 is out of marbles, Ji-hun can't bring himself to loan him a marble, instead accepting what he perceives to be a victory. He pulls another out of his pocket and wanders off, much to Ji-hun's distress. And Ji-young essentially sacrifices herself for Sae Biok by dropping the marble at her feet, revealing that she has no reason to win, whereas Sae Biok still has family in North Korea. Ji-young is shot dead. Ali, discovering that the marbles in his bag are pebbles slipped in there by Sang-woo, is shot dead. And 001 finally finds his home in the fabricated neighborhood. He proposes that he and Ji-hun make one last all-or-nothing bet, revealing that he knew Ji-hun was tricking him into taking his marbles the whole time. 001 gives Ji-hun his remaining marble, reminding him that they're Gganbu, and Gganbu share everything. He's happy to go out like this, having had one last good time and made a true friend. He holds Ji-hun as he sobs, and when he finally walks away, 001 remembers his name, Oh-il-nam. The frontman discovers that the imposter has been in his personal quarters thanks to the position of the phone, but he's pulled away before he can discover him by news of a body being washed ashore. The frontman expresses some knowledge of the Korean police. Perhaps the frontman himself is Junho's missing brother. Maybe former winners become the new frontman? The body that's discovered is the one Junho tossed overboard during his infiltration and planted his ID on. The frontman takes a good long look at that ID. The remaining players, meanwhile, are not in a good mood, especially not 069, whose partner in the marbles game was his wife, and Ji-hun, who still feels responsible for the death of 001. 069 has a breakdown until Sang-woo lectures him into shape. He gradually starts addressing the entire room. He's rationalizing his own actions, having essentially sentenced Ali to death. The VIPs all arrive wearing very fancy animal masks. The frontman greets them and laments that the host can't be there personally due to some urgent business. They're all present to watch the next game and have been betting on the outcome, as predicted. One of them had a big sum on 069, who, as they can see on the video screens, is about to hang himself. Junho, meanwhile, is still nearby and takes it upon himself to knock out the waiter and steal his outfit to get closer to the VIPs. When the players wake up the next morning, they find 069 dead, hanging from his bunk, as the announcer's voice tells them he's been eliminated, and the piggy bank fills up a little more. The fifth game is about to begin. Everyone make their way up the staircase. The frontman introduces the game to the VIPs, who are lounging around with human footstools, and the staff introduces it to the players. Each is ordered to choose a mannequin and take its corresponding vest, numbered 1 through 16. The announcer at the push of the frontman's button explains that the numbers determine the order in which they'll be playing. As Ji-hun deliberates, everyone else grabs the remaining numbers, leaving only 1 and 16, the two most dangerous numbers, he theorizes. Luckily, the decision is made for him. One of the other players, 096, politely requests to be number 1. He finally wants to take ownership of his life. There's a giant bridge. It's full of alternating stepping stones made of either tempered or normal glass. The tempered glass will hold the weight of 2 people, the normal glass won't even support 1. The vest numbers determine the order in which you cross the bridge. The time limit is also 16 minutes. Everyone must cross. 096 makes it one step before falling to his death. Attempts to figure out a pattern to the glass fall flat. Obviously, with each unsuccessful attempt, it gets easier for the next person. Meanwhile, in the VIP area, one of the most detestable guests takes a shine to the disguised Junho, ordering him first to sit beside him to fill his drink, and then to remove his mask. This is a problem, since the frontman has seen his police ID and would recognize him. Eventually, the players in the back of the line start to get anxious about the time limit and begin shoving the players in front through the panes of glass. Gi-hun brings up the rear, but the fact he can't even remember which of the first two panels is the correct one doesn't exactly bode well. After a while, Deoksu finds himself the leader of the pack, with several more panels to clear and only about 6 minutes left. He refuses to proceed unless someone else goes ahead of him. Meanwhile, Junho persuades the VIP to take him somewhere they can be alone. The VIP gets his body out and promises to change Junho's life if he can satisfy him within 5 minutes, but he gets more than he bargained for. Suddenly at gunpoint, Junho gives him 5 minutes to tell him everything he knows about the games. On the bridge, Myeo confronts Deoksu and has run out of patience for him. She agrees to go ahead of him, but when she steps on his panel, she grabs him around the waist and refuses to let go. He said they'd stay together until the end. After all, she said she'd kill him if he betrayed her, and he betrayed her. So, here we are. She pulls him back through the next panel and they both fall to their deaths. Sangwoo, Sae Byok, and Gi-hun are among the few remaining, including a glassmaker who can identify the faint stain marks in the tempered glass. Since the glassmaker is able to examine the refraction of the light through the glass, the frontman changes the settings to make it harder for him. In the dark, the glassmaker needs to analyze the sounds of the glass in order to make a decision. So he throws the only thing he has available, 001's marble from the previous game, which Gi-hun has been carrying ever since. But one marble isn't enough for 2 panes of glass. Since he's taking too long, Sangwoo pushes him through the final pane to his death, and the 3 main characters make it across. Seconds later, all the remaining panels explode behind them. All 3 get slashed by the debris. Judging by Sae Byok's reaction, she got hit worse than the others. Meanwhile, Junho escapes from the facility using one of the dive packs. The frontman and several goons pursue him in a speedboat. Frontman opens with Junho reaching the mainland with evidence of the games on his phone. Sangwoo's relationship with Gi-hun is badly suffering. In the bathroom, we see that a giant chunk of glass is wedged in her stomach. She pulls it free and bandages the wound, but it's a bad one. The finalists have all been given numbered tuxedos as a reward for their success. The front man is still on the island in pursuit of Junho. He shoots a hole into the oxygen canister that Junho left on the beach. The officer is able to call his superior and request that he locate his signal and send a whole squad there. He also sends him several of the photos and videos he has taken as evidence, which should do the trick, but there isn't enough signal for the messages to get through. Several fine meals are prepared for the finalists on a table in the shape of a triangle. The guards are waiting on the players. Gi-hun and Sang-woo angrily stare at each other while eating, and Sae Byok does her very best to remain conscious. All while Junho continues to run around the island, trying to evade capture for long enough to get some consistent phone signal. Eventually, he's cornered. The front man knows plenty about the gun-loading policies of the Korean police. So he knows that Junho only has one remaining bullet, which he puts in the front man's shoulder. But that doesn't dissuade him. Junho asks who the hell he is, and finally the twist is revealed. The front man is indeed Junho's brother, In-ho. He asks Junho to make this easy, but he won't. Instead of answering his brother's question of why, In-ho instead shoots Junho, and he falls off the cliff into the ocean. The finalists were all left with a steak knife each following their dinner, and back in the dorm room, each sits on their bed and contemplates stabbing the others. Sae Byok, though, isn't looking too shabby. Gi-hun approaches her, and after a brief conversation about her family back in North Korea, they agree to make a deal. If either of them can make it out of this, they'll look after each other's loved ones. Before he can swear to this, though, Gi-hun realizes that Sang-woo has fallen asleep, and begins to cross the room with his knife drawn, ready to kill him. Sae Byok tells him not to, that's not who he is. And she's right. After that wise advice, though, she begins to lose consciousness from the blood loss. Ji-hun summons help, but the guards enter with a coffin, not a doctor. When Ji-hun turns around, Sang-woo is standing over Sae Byak's bedside, having cut her throat. Enraged, Ji-hun picks up his own knife and lunges at him, but the guards separate them since there's still a final game to play. Sang-woo and Ji-hun are going to play Squid and each will be on opposing sides of offense or defense. Ji-hun chooses offense. With the VIPs watching from above with interest, the front man adds extra narration, confirming that this game is the most physical and violent from childhood days. There are few rules with this one. Ji-hun has a pocket knife, which he intends to use to try and win this game. Punches are traded while Sang-woo manages to grab the knife and stab Ji-hun several times. Ji-hun bites a chunk out of his opponent's leg. Using the knife stuck through his hand, Ji-hun pulls it out and looks set to stab Sang-woo, but decides not to. He lets the man live while Ji-hun walks to the finish line. But he can't cross it. Instead, he decides to enact Rule 3 and end the games right here. In doing so, this means he gives up the prize money completely but saves his friend. Sang-woo stabs himself in the neck, telling Ji-hun to help his mother before passing away. As he does, Ji-hun wins by default. With the games over and Ji-hun blindfolded, he sits in a limo with the front man. In-ho mentions how these games are similar to betting on horses before drugging Ji-hun and pushing him out into the street. Inside his mouth though is a credit card. Ji-hun uses the card inside the terminal and checks out his balance. His PIN number? 0456. He withdraws 10,000 won, leaving him with $48 million. Ji-hun swings by the old neighborhood and finds Sang-woo's mother. Ji-hun remains silent, unable to tell her the heartbreaking news about her son's fate. Ji-hun heads home where he finds his mum lying on the floor. Despite doing all he can for her, his mum has passed away. He holds her as best he can, struggling to hold back tears as he mourns her passing. 1 year later, Ji-hun is a changed man and is called to see the bank manager. He wants to try and help him grow his financial assets, but Ji-hun is having none of it. He hasn't touched the money since winning it and instead asks the bank manager for 10,000 won. Heading down to the docks, he uses that to buy a rose. Attached to that rose is a black envelope with a red ribbon. Inside is a business card, with the words, December 24, 11:30 p.m., Sky Building 77th floor, written on. And the sender is your Gganbu. Ji-hun arrives at the apartment right on time, where he finds Il-nam alive. Ji-hun is completely shocked, unable to accept that this man is alive. However, the shocking truth is that Il-nam is actually a part of all this and helped to set up the games. As he says himself, he makes a living out of lending money to others. He called Ji-hun over because he's noticed that he hasn't spent any of the money he's won. Il-nam quizzes him, believing Ji-hun is suffering badly from guilt over all those who have lost their lives in the games. Now, based on what Junho found in the archives and Il-nam's little monologue that follows, these games started back in the early 90s. Since then, there's always been one winner, and it seems like that winner could go on become a figurehead staff member like frontman Il-nam, and a bunch of rich buddies got together and decided to come up with a more productive way of spending their money. With more cash than they knew what to do with, they all set up this series of games. The VIPs are actually those in charge of the games, betting money on people like horses. They created this game as a way of having fun. Ji-hun is pretty disgusted, but Il-nam is quick to remind him that 93% of people sign their contracts again, knowing exactly what lay in store for them from these games. Il-nam has a tumor, he's dying and doesn't have long to live. Il-nam decided to join in and play the games this time. He wanted to feel a sense of joy in engaging with others, rather than just spectating and dying. Joining and playing with Ji-hun during the fourth challenge allowed him to remember all the moments he had forgotten in his life from such a long time ago. This is why Ji-hun was able to progress forward and why Il-nam sacrificed himself. Although this gunshot was a decoy. As the clock chimes midnight, Il-nam passes away. With Ji-hun finally learning the truth about the games and their origin, he undergoes a drastic transformation. He gets his hair cut and dyed red, heading off to help Shail, Sae Byak's brother. He brings him to Sang-woo's mum and asks her to look after him. As he walks away, Sang-woo's mum opens the suitcase to find it completely packed full of cash with an accompanying note, "It's the money I owe Sang-woo." En route to the airport after ringing Ga-young, Ji-hun notices that same businessman from before playing with a poor guy outside. Exchanging slaps and smacking envelopes, Ji-hun charges across the platforms but misses the man as he boards a train and escapes. For the victim, however, Ji-hun snatches his business card away and demands he not compete. At the airport, an enraged Ji-hun rings the front man and promises that he'll pay for what's happened to him and the others. Instead of boarding the plane, he turns and walks away, determined to fight back and put an end to this once and for all.